We are live from Council Chamber. Before we begin, I will go over the emergency response plan for this room. In an emergency, everyone must evacuate through the nearest safe exit. Those seated in the gallery take direction from security to evacuate. Council takes direction from the meeting clerk. After evacuating the room, please proceed to a stairwell. Take the stairs to ground level and evacuate the building through the doors marked emergency exit and go to the muster point. Do not take an elevator or walk through the city room. Anyone with limited mobility should identify themselves to security or the meeting clerk during evacuation. And finally, please speak with security or a meeting clerk if you require first aid. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order this morning with a roll call. Councillor Wright.
Good morning.
Councillor Knack.
Good morning.
Mayor Sohi. And Councillor Rice.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Excellent. Committee's here. No other council members joining us in person or any joining online?
Councillor Prince-Bay is here.
Good morning, Councillor Prince-Bay.
Councillor Jans, I'm here too. Mayor Sohi.
Oh, Mayor Sohi's here. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And I'll start with the land acknowledgement. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge that we meet on the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory and the Métis homeland, and acknowledge the diverse and indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Nakota Iska, as well as Métis and Inuit, and now settlers from around the world. So adoption of the agenda. We only have one item on the agenda.
I move adoption of the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wright. Any questions, any debate? If you would like to vote on adoption of the, or, selected that item selected. So Councillor Wright, you moved it. Hearing no questions or debate, please vote.
I'm a yes, Madam Clerk.
Thank you,
I'm
Councillor.
a yes as well.
Thank you, Mayor Sohi. We're just having some technical difficulties.
Do you want us to vote by show of hands or?
I believe that we got all of the votes, so it was carried 5-0 with the mayor in the affirmative.
Okay, 5-0. Yeah, we'll have that for the minutes. Okay, excellent. Requests to speak. So we have a number of speakers who I'm going to read in who are previously approved at the June 17th Urban Planning Committee meeting, but we didn't get to. And then we have one additional speaker received for today. So the speakers previously approved were Ryan Jakes, Brandon Kwong, Hero Laird, Raquel Farreau, Nathan Binema, Rod Olstad, Christine Kowalchuk, Sherry Heschuk, Christy Jackson, Aaron Budnick, and Richard Mary. And the one additional speaker we've received is Cheryl Villitard. Clerk, do we require a motion to approve Cheryl, or?
We do, but we have skipped a few steps.
Oh, my apologies.
So we've just adopted the agenda. We do have minutes to approve.
Oh, yes, I see. Yes, we have.
We do need to select the item for debate as well.
Yes, I guess so. So, Councillor Knack.
I'll move the approval of the minutes from the June 17th, 2025 Urban Planning Committee meeting.
Okay. Any questions? Any debate? Hearing none, please vote.
I'm a yes.
Thank you, Mayor Sohi. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That is carried unanimously. As for protocol items, I'm not aware of any. And select items for debate.
I'll select 6.1, please.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wright. Any questions? Any debate? Please call the vote on the selected items.
We do not need to vote on that, and there are no other reports not selected for debate. So now we can go on to the approving the request to speak.
Perfect, thank you. Shaking off the summer cobwebs. So for the request to speak, do we need to approve the additional speaker?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I take a motion to do so.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Any questions? Any debate? Please vote on hearing from the one additional speaker.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you, Mayor Sohi. We have all the votes.
excellent. Thank you. Please display the vote. And that is carried unanimously. Okay, there is no request for time specific. I'm not aware of any councillor inquiries. I'm not aware of reports to be dealt with a different meeting or a request to reschedule. So now we can get to item 6.1.
All right. Good morning. I am Pascal Douceur. I'm the branch manager of infrastructure planning and design. We have opening remarks this morning, and then we will turn it to speakers. So the report before you seeks the approval of the Mill Creek Trestle Bridge and culvert under 76th Avenue, environmental impact assessment and site location study. The project includes replacing the historic timber trestle pedestrian bridge, replacing the 76th Avenue culvert with a roadway bridge, and realigning Mill Creek to prevent erosion and enhance slope stability. The project is being completed as part of the Bridge Renewal Program, with construction scheduled to begin later this year. The existing Mill Creek Trestle Bridge has reached the end of its service life and requires replacement to ensure a safe crossing for all trail users. The culvert under 76th Avenue is aging and is contributing to erosion and slope stability issues in the surrounding areas. After considering the condition of the culvert, budget, timelines, environmental benefits, erosion and flooding risks, we decided to replace the existing culvert with a new bridge. The replacement project will also include realignment, daylighting, and restoration of Mill Creek, which has been a long-standing goal for the city. I'm joined today in person by Natalie Lazurko and Joanna Young with Transportation Planning and Design. And then remotely we have Sarah Rami from Planning and Environment Services, as well as Sam El-Matar with Transportation Infrastructure Delivery. We also have a few other folks to support the conversation, and all will be available to answer your questions after the speakers. Thank you.
So it's time for public speakers.
Is that there? Nothing further?
No, nothing further. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I'll call the speakers and I'll ask if they're here, if they could signify, or if they're online, if they could say hi. Ryan Jakes is in person. Good morning, Ryan. Brandon Kwong.
Morning.
Hero Laird. I do know we got a correspondence from Hero, though. If they're unable to make to join us, council would have received a message. Raquel Farrow.
Thank you.
Nathan Binema. Rod Olstad.
Good morning.
Christine Kowalchuk. Sherry Heschuk. Christy Jackson.
Here, thanks.
And Aaron Budnick. And Richard Mary. And Cheryl Villitard.
Hello.
Okay, so I'll just proceed through the list, and if folks are able to join us, then that's great. We have moved quite quickly. So, if the first speaker wants to join us down at as per the clerk's direction, I'm not sure where we're going to sit today. I'll just read out the required process. So, speakers will be heard in panels, and we're just going to have one panel. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to present. The clerk will run the official timer in the meeting, and it will be displayed in the virtual meeting. The light will be green for the first 4 minutes, turn yellow when there's 1 minute left, and flash red when the 5 minutes are up. When everyone in your panel has had a chance to present, members of council may ask questions of you or other panel members. For this reason, please remain in the meeting until all questions have been answered. If you're participating virtually, please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please reach out to the office of the city clerk using the contact information provided at your registration. And again, always, this is a forum for safe and inclusive conversations in our environment and workplace for both in-person and virtual attendees. And hearing from the public is very important to council and part of our process. So we have we can hear the full diversity of opinions in our community. I think from there, are we ready to go? I think so. All right, Mr. Jakes, guest Jakes, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Sounds good, thanks. I have a presentation as well. Oh, there we go. All right. Good morning, Chair and Urban Planning Committee members. You will hear from many folks, including from Ritchie resident Hero Laird, who unfortunately is not available to speak today, in council correspondence and here, with a wide range of concerns about these rushed road ridge plans that had insufficient consultation and will have tens of millions in life cycle costs. But allow me to set the stage. I also emailed my presentation to each of you. Please refer to it as a supplement, since I have limited time. Next slide, please. The 76 Ave crossing in Mill Creek Ravine is just 6 blocks or a 1-minute drive south of Arterial Road 82 Ave and its major 4-lane road bridge. And it only has utility if you are driving and your origin and destination are in these neighborhoods. Next slide, please. Even then, it is a maximum of 3 minutes extra, and with 82 Ave intersection upgrades at 96th Street and 89th Street, left turns would be easy at any time of day. Next slide, please. What if 76 Ave was closed to vehicle traffic and naturalized with east-west active transportation using the trestle bridge, as proposed by the group Paths for People? From what I can see in the reports, the city unilaterally decided that the location of this road bridge in Mill Creek Ravine is essential at a conceptual level, but here's how I see it. The location is not essential because the project itself is not necessarily essential. Next slide, please. Whether the road bridge is a need or a want, it is seemingly without any traffic analysis, nor analysis of a natural state to compare to the road bridge scenario. Do you find this void of an environmental baseline acceptable, knowing the stakes of potential erosion here and downstream, the identified risk of slope failure during construction, and the vitality of the Mill Creek ecosystem in general? Next slide, please. As for traffic, to my knowledge, there is not a single collector road bridge anywhere in city limits. Have you considered how this unprecedented collector road bridge could be overbuilt and possibly even attract shortcutters from outside the neighborhoods and at higher speeds? Next slide, please. I'm aware that you have heard calls for pausing things like zoning bylaw renewal and district plans, but pausing this is fundamentally different. Housing changes are incremental, but this road bridge would still be standing in the year 2100. And there is a time and place for pausing. Just imagine what our city would be like if the Met's River Valley Freeway plans were not paused. Surely we can afford to pause for 1 year or less instead of rushing into a 100-year commitment. Also on the subject of housing, the Residential Infill Working Group is getting their recommendations analyzed by the city. It is only fair to give this equally legitimate community proposal on naturalization a real look. Pausing should simply not be a very contentious issue for Mill Creek residents. Removing part of 97th Street for the Hazeldean Greenway was controversial. Now everybody loves it. It's all about how you spin it. You can demonstrate a commitment to fiscal responsibility and public consultation by pausing, and in conjunction with intersection upgrades and perhaps savings indirectly reinvested in the community, I genuinely think people could come around to the idea of naturalization. And Jans, as councillor for this project, I want to appeal directly to you as well. At your campaign launch, you talked about how your mentor and former city councillor Alan Bolstad demonstrated real leadership by working to move the Overton window on banning smoking from restaurants. Well, we don't have the luxury of being able to lose this battle 4 times. If you approve this today and at City Council next week, the project will be going ahead and the Overton window will be stuck where it is. We need a pause to give people time to marinate. Next slide, please. We have a massive and growing infrastructure deficit, and if we can't even have a city-led conversation with Edmontonians about possible opportunities, then I don't even know what to do. And now we're facing claims that sprawl pays for itself while ignoring transit and shrugging off renewal costs and assuming continued explosive population growth. We're clearly scraping the bottom of the barrel with things like saving $40K a year by canceling front yards in Bloom, but spending $22.8 million on all this is essential. Meanwhile, Mill Creek is a concrete waterfall that empties into the river with no funding to reclaim it. As well, I personally have some regrets in my approach, including a significant misinterpretation of increased area capacity that I do apologize for and have endeavored to fix, but don't let my mistakes diminish the merits of pausing. Would the city consider building this road bridge in this location essential if there was no road here today? While pivoting last minute is not ideal, this is our only chance to pause and reflect. I urge you to not approve this today and instead approve a forthcoming request for reporting with more in-depth analysis and data. Thank you.
Thank you, Guest Kwong.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Urban Planning Committee. My name is Brandon Kwong, and I'm speaking on behalf of Paths for People. We're a volunteer nonprofit working to make Edmonton a friendlier place to walk, roll, and cycle. And I'm speaking to you right now from on-site from the Mill Creek Trestle Bridge and the location of the proposed vehicle bridge on 76th Ave. It's a short walk for me. I can nearly see the East End from my house. And for a number of years before that, I lived just 2 blocks south of Ritchie Market on the other side of what's affectionately known here as the Dip-de-Doo. So I think it's fair to say that my experience straddles this stretch of road quite dearly. And yet I do not find the concerns about renaturalization or the closure of this area to vehicle traffic very compelling at all. Our organization was one of those engaged in the design as it evolved from the replacement of the trestle bridge and the existing culvert to the design and construction of an entirely new vehicle bridge instead. And that came as a little bit of a surprise because a culvert and a car bridge aren't exactly of a similar scale. But clearly a lot of thinking and work had already been put into the design by the time that we or the community had a chance to hear about it. So at that point, we started reaching out to the public and we heard lots back on both sides. The people we had a much harder time engaging with was actually the project and the design team. In the report attached today, the elements deemed essential in justifying a car bridge are for emergency services, future mass transit, and erosion control. And we had asked the project team directly about all of these. They weren't able to confirm that this section of 76th Ave is an emergency road. And recognizing that I'm not an expert either, the closest fire station to here is number 6, one that I know the sirens of very well. And the distance to the east end of this stretch is 1.4 kilometers or a 2-minute drive. If you choose to take White Avenue instead, it becomes 1.5 kilometers or a 2-minute drive. And any longer route between, say, someone's home and a nearby hospital only makes that difference relatively smaller. As for mass transit, the plans at this time are far from finalized and good alternatives do exist. And as for erosion control, you've always had our full support, but car bridges don't help with erosion control. Erosion control helps with erosion control, and renaturalized areas can help with erosion control. So what seemed apparent to me through this process was that an engagement and design process stuck in the past. It was easy when things were ticking along as planned, but when things started to go a little bit sideways, we fell back on traditional, outdated tools and mindsets that arrived at a foregone conclusion that there's no other feasible options than building a car bridge. And if we're going to build the kind of city that's laid out in the city plan, one that's healthy, sustainable, climate resilient, livable, vibrant, we're going to need updated ways of thinking, and we're going to need courage. Renaturalizing this small part of Mill Creek for humans was/is a rare opportunity to imagine a treasured public space. You know, a McKinnon Ravine instead of a Wellington Bridge, Terwilliger Dog Park instead of a ladder bridge. So we should start on the erosion control right away. We should start replacing the trestle bridge right away. But we don't have to start building a car bridge right away. We call on this committee to commission a report that explores alternative designs in good faith and with updated traffic and transit models, as well as environmental and social impact assessments. And we'd be more than happy to help with the engagement on that report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Guest Laird, one more time.
They have withdrawn their request.
Okay, excellent. I'll refer the committee members to their correspondence. Guest Furrow, you have 5 minutes.
I can keep this voice. Thanks very much. I can keep this super short because the last 2 speakers were so clear that more information is needed to make a good decision. So hopefully administration can come back with the information you'd need to be certain that no bridge is the best option. I think you need a lot more information about the capital costs and the ongoing operational costs of putting in a car bridge. More information on the carbon budget of doing so. What could eliminating yet another car route do for lowering our carbon budget? What health benefits could come to the area? And a much more robust report on the possible downside of losing any kind of emergency access. It does not look like any necessary critical emergency access would be lost when you look at the maps that Ryan and others have provided. Yeah, I think when he says 3 minutes would be the longest additional time for any kind of commute, that looks like that wouldn't even apply to an emergency vehicle. That would be from like one person trying to get from the most, anyways, 3 minutes looks like an incredible maximum time, and it doesn't look like it would apply to the emergency vehicles. So I also think in the report that there is more benefit for naturalization of the Mill Creek there if you don't do a car bridge. Like, I thought it was quite sad that they wanted to further engineer the Mill Creek. I mean, that creek is so sadly channelized. There'd be opportunity for giving back its rights and allowing it to roam if they weren't dictating the shortest route for it to accommodate a road bridge. So yeah, I just think there's too many cost savings. We cannot afford this bridge, and it would add health benefits, quiet the area, and green the area. It would be better for the ravine. It would be better for the people around if we did not do this road bridge. So I too would like to see a pause to get information that would allow council to make a decision. And I think the decision would be not to do it if we had the right information before us. Thanks.
Thank you. Guest Binema? Clerk, I thought I saw them join. Guest Nathan Binema?
Yes, just unmuted. Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Yeah, you have 5 minutes.
Great. I see you have my presentation there. So good morning, Urban Planning Committee. I'm arguing that a bridge is not essential in this location. Next slide, please. This slide shows traffic volumes averages for 76th Avenue, 82nd Avenue, and 63rd Avenue drawn from the average annual weekday traffic volume data. Averages for 82nd and 63rd Avenue are 5 times the volume on 76th Avenue. If traffic over the 76th Avenue Bridge were diverted evenly to 82nd Ave and 63rd Ave, traffic volumes on both roads would increase by only 10%. Next slide, please. Here we can see a map. Next slide. Oh, yeah, there it is. Sorry. Here we can see a map showing the fire stations. Fire Station 6 will obviously use White Avenue to cross Mill Creek. Fire Station number 15 will most easily use 63rd Avenue to cross Mill Creek, and Fire Station 9 will go to the Sherwood Park Freeway, which splits into Argyle Road and 82nd Avenue. So from this, I find it hard to see an instance where the fire stations would need the 76th Avenue Bridge or where it would be more convenient. Next slide, please. Here you can see that on the west side of the Mill Creek Ravine, 76th Avenue is a secondary corridor, while on the east side it is not. You can also see that 76th Avenue stops at the rail yards, meaning it is clearly not a crosstown route for vehicles. I note in passing that we seem to be fine with the bridge running through a ravine, one of Edmonton's treasures, but not over an industrial site. A future crosstown bus route could go west on 82nd Avenue over the Mill Creek Ravine, then south on 96th Avenue to serve the large condo buildings there, then west on 76th Avenue to serve the secondary corridor and its businesses, then north on 100th Street to serve Happy Beer Street and that secondary corridor, and finally west on White Avenue again. Next slide, please. Is 76th Avenue essential for either cycling or vehicle connectivity? Speaking a bit from personal experience, 76th Avenue is not pleasant cycling in any case, and if I need to go somewhere southeast on my bike, there's a spur trail out of the ravine into the Avonmore neighborhood shown in this photo, which is a more appealing and safer route. From a driver's perspective, I worked 4 summers driving a truck and trailer for a lawn maintenance company with sites all over the city. I remember using 82nd Avenue and Argyle Road frequently, but I don't remember once using 76th Avenue. The bridge would appear to be a connection and a convenience mainly for the Mill Creek adjacent neighborhoods between Argyle and White. Next slide, please. I've made the case that a bridge does not significantly improve connectivity for vehicle traffic, but what about for users of the ravine? In all the ravines in Edmonton I've walked in with many different people, I find that a bridge is often the point at which folks will choose to turn around. Under a bridge is not a pleasant place to be, as you can see from the photo on the left. What could the future of this parcel of land look like instead? With no road coming through, connectivity for human and animal users of the ravine would be improved, and 1.5 acres of land could be reclaimed for native ecosystems, parkland, etc. Next slide, please. Finally, as a Strong Towns reader, transparent local accounting is a key issue for me. I'm curious about when the estimate of 22.8 million cost for the bridge was made and how much higher the true cost may end up being when accounting for inflation and other factors. I didn't see construction and life cycle costs broken down by options in the site location study, and I would like to see estimates for both of those costs along with a plan for how they would be recouped for each option, including naturalization, and for that to be publicly available before a project of this scale goes ahead. In the absence of that information, I would urge you to ask your administration what those construction and especially life cycle costs might be here today. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Guest Olstad.
Good morning, councillors. Because of a visual impairment, I typically have been using text to speech. So I thank you very much for your indulgence. And I'm going to roll the Siri here to present my thoughts on this issue. So thanks very much for your indulgence.
Good morning, councillors. I am speaking in opposition to the 2 motions in question. Instead, I urge councillors to table these motions until after the October municipal elections. Further, I urge councillors to task administration with undertaking a fulsome traffic study of 76 Ave at the Mill Creek crossing to provide needed data to make a scientifically informed assessment whether or not this crossing is indeed essential. The proposed bridge and associated erosion control would have significant impacts on the ecological and aesthetic integrity of Mill Creek. What are the best ways to protect the ecological and aesthetic integrity of Mill Creek? Will the integrity of Mill Creek, especially as related to mitigating damaging erosion, be best protected by significantly restricting automobile traffic at the Mill Creek crossing along 76th Ave? Could there be significant support for such a decision, especially given the high costs of the proposed span bridge, realignment of the creek and significant erosion control measures? Would any projected benefits be worth the high costs? Mill Creek is beloved for its natural features, the vegetation, plants, trees, flowers, and the sound of the running water. Many of these natural features have been engineered out of existence with the culverting of the creek north of around 93 Ave and south of near Argyle to 51 Ave of the area that remains in a somewhat natural condition. Significant parts of the creek bank have been engineered to the point where the beloved natural features have been replaced with engineered riprap, that is, rock-reinforced embankments. If the 76 Ave corridor is deemed essential and the creek realigned and span bridge built as proposed, even more engineering of the creek bank will be required to mitigate likely erosion that will be the consequence of the construction process. Realignment of the creek will result in the elimination of essential vegetation, essential because it helps to mitigate erosion during high rainfall and/or spring runoff events. Presumably, engineers will replace much or all of the embankment vegetation with riprap and/or additional engineered erosion control features that will diminish the natural beauty of the current riparian region. To me, and to no small number of Edmontonians, I would venture, the aesthetic costs of building this span bridge far outweigh any supposed transportation benefits that may be gained. Let alone, are any of the supposed benefits really worth a nearly $25 million cost? I agree with other speakers who urge if was to do a proper transportation study and a fulsome public education and opinion consultation. I remember attending a number of years ago now, a presentation from a U of a professor, whose name escapes me, who lamented the loss of Mill Creek ecological attributes such as wildlife corridor and fisheries, if memory serves. Those losses caused by the extensive measures to bury the creek as described above. Could the restriction of automobile traffic on 76 Ave at Mill Creek create a significantly attractive destination to justify restricting traffic on the road? We need evidence to determine this. Why not choose a few weekends this early fall or next spring to temporarily close 76 Ave to automobiles on either sides of the ravine to determine if Edmontonians would value this feature over the conveniences provided by keeping a crossing at 76 Ave open? How about creating a Mill Creek Festival at 76 Ave east of 96th Street to truly create a destination to celebrate Edmontonians' love for Mill Creek? In preparing the two bylaws in question, did administration make unjustified and arbitrary assumptions that Edmontonians value automobile convenience over a number of other benefits? Many roads in Paris are being shut down or restricted with surprising support from Parisians. I urge Council to be courageous in challenging assumptions about popular support for the high costs of automobile convenience.
Yeah, and I would just like to add to that, I guess, or am I out of time here already?
Nope, you have 60 seconds.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I mean, as has been said before as well. I mean, this creek has been so engineered, and I wonder if the money could be directed to instead of a bridge, if that money could be directed to further daylighting the creek closer to the river to return some of its natural function. You know, could fish return to this creek? You know, for example, if the original course of the creek was reintegrated into the stream. Again, I would encourage councillors to be courageous and to question some of the assumptions about the priority that's given to automobile traffic in this area. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Guest Kowalchuk.
Good morning. Edmonton River Valley Conservation Coalition engaged with city planners regarding the Mill Creek Trestle Bridge replacement. We support this project. However, we do not support the 76th Avenue roadway bridge replacement, and we urge you to direct administration to undertake further consultation and consideration of the community suggestion to close this portion of the roadway and renaturalize the area. As the community members leading the advocacy to halt the roadway bridge construction point out, there's already a major arterial road bridge just 6 blocks north on 82nd Avenue. For our city to become resilient and mitigate the ecological and social crises we're facing, we need to decrease reliance on cars and look for opportunities like this one to minimize roadways. We also need to restore and renaturalize areas wherever we can. Many cities around the world are already doing this work, including closing roadways. And as Rod just noted, Paris closes the Champs-Élysées to cars at least once a week, and it's permanently closed roads along the Seine River to cars years ago. Montreal has closed and rewilded alleys across the city. We're so lucky to have a natural area to rewild. Restoring and renaturalizing this part of Mill Creek would improve the area for wildlife connectivity and habitat, including by greatly reducing traffic noise in the area. And it would enhance the quality of life of the people living nearby and those using this trail. It would also save tens of millions of dollars in construction and money forevermore in operations. Let's use this opportunity to lower operational costs in our city and improve our natural areas and quality of life. That money could be used to continue to daylight Mill Creek, again, as Rod just noted, which would further save ongoing operational costs and improve our natural areas and quality of life. While we understand that some people who use this roadway opposes closure, it does not seem there's been an opportunity for public discussion of this option. As we've learned from the community members leading the advocacy to halt the roadway bridge construction, there's been no Indigenous or public consultation regarding this plan. It was not included in the discussions ERVCC had with planners regarding the trestle bridge replacement. And a road bridge is not simply a detail of a trestle bridge replacement. It should be considered its own major project with a separate, thorough Indigenous and public engagement process. Please do not approve the road bridge construction in your approval of the trestle bridge replacement. Instead, use this opportunity to truly make our city better, closing that portion of the roadway and renaturalizing the area and showing the kind of thinking needed now and in the future for affordability, sustainability, and livability of our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Guest Heschuk? Sherry Heschuk? Going once, going twice. Guest Christy Jackson?
Yes, hello.
Awesome. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good day, Urban Planning Committee. Since I've been taking in these meetings, I do have a lot of sympathy for you as city councilors and all you have to consider. I'm only here today to ask that you are sure that proceeding with the building of this road bridge is not based on some strongly biased logic. And if you won't be able to defend the rationale long-term, then please just put the brakes on for a bit until you are sure. I ask you to be brave. I think we're all prone to the bias of always doing what we've always done, taking the easy road. But building a new road bridge at a cost of several $1 million should not be taken lightly when it could be spent on potentially more worthwhile investments in the city. I urge councillors to ensure that all considerations are made and to consult the wider public as to whether they want their funds to go to this bridge that is only used by a small number of Edmontonians. So I have two main points I want to elaborate on then. First is, I think the essential question that has to be asked in the context of Edmonton's River Valley Area Redevelopment Plan is, would the bridge be built today if it were not already there? If vehicle traffic wasn't there. So White Ave is 6 blocks north, and the train yards limit connection opportunities to the west on 76th. So I think it's very clear that the answer is no way would this roadway be built today through our precious ravine if the road was not there. The ARP aims high, section 4.32 encourages you to evaluate opportunities to restore lands used for transportation infrastructure. Well, opportunity alert. So the second point I'd like to make is that from what I've seen, the residents of the 4 neighboring communities are treated as the only stakeholders, and even they haven't had much true and open consultation. In fact, planners have advised that there was no consultation because there are no options. And I just cannot see how that can be true. And what I want to highlight here is that this projected cost, along with any unforeseen costs and the continued maintenance, will be paid by all taxpayers. Shouldn't the benefits to all Edmontonians therefore be weighed? I can say with certainty that the diverse users of Mill Creek Park System, not just those 4 communities, will be impacted for the next century by this hurried approach that the city's taken on this project. So there is a huge opportunity here in taking just a little extra time to make sure we get this right. Again, I ask you to be brave, to reconsider our options and to consult. I asked you to factor in that the electorate will express their values this fall and that a clear case can be made to council to just pause this major and long-term decision until after the election. Urban Planning Committee members, please tell council that more time is needed to be sure whether this road bridge is really essential. Thank you.
Thank you. Guest Budnick.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Urban Planning Committee. My name is Aaron Budnick, and I'm here on behalf of the YEG Bike Coalition. to offer feedback on the proposed Mill Creek Trestle Bridge and 76th Avenue Crossing project. Though we support the renewal of the Trestle Bridge itself, it is a vital piece of active transportation infrastructure in our city, and its restoration to modern, accessible standards is very welcome. We are very concerned about the recommendation to replace, excuse me, the 76th Ave culvert with a new vehicular bridge, especially in the absence of clear evidence demonstrating that this is necessary. The justification provided relies on unsubstantiated assumptions around traffic demand and future transit plans. There's currently no public transit service on this corridor, and if ETS intends to establish a route here, that information should be made public, along with ridership projections, costs, and timelines, before it's used as justification for building a new road infrastructure in the ravine. Likewise, claims about removing the bridge itself, which would overload crossings like Argyle and 82 Avenue, remain unsupported by data. If we're being told that traffic flow or emergency response would be negatively impacted, the public deserves to see that analysis. And if shortcutting is a concern, we'd like to remind you that the upcoming neighborhood renewals in the area provide ample opportunity for traffic calming and modal filtering to mitigate those issues. Our concern is not just about traffic, it's about priorities. Every road or bridge we build today locks in car dependency tomorrow, and we simply cannot afford to continue on that path, fiscally, environmentally, or socially. Council has committed to a non-car modal share of 50% by 2050, but that won't be possible if we keep designing for car throughput above all else. We're asking you to reconsider whether this bridge is truly necessary, or whether we're repeating the same habits that have led to today's fiscal and climate challenges. This is a chance to do something different. Instead of building a new road bridge, the city should maintain high-quality pedestrian and cycling connections across the ravine while removing an overbuilt and unnecessary road link. The new Avonmore and Bonnie Doon LRT stations are less than 10 minutes away from Ritchie Market by bike, and the corridor could become a showcase for integrated, sustainable mobility. Before moving this project forward, we urge you to request a traffic analysis of current and future conditions, including realistic diversion modeling, public disclosure of any ETS plans or budgets tied to this corridor, a full capital and operating cost comparison between all options, including maintaining only the trestle crossing, and a carbon budget impact assessment to understand how this project and the above options align with the city's climate goals. Council has a real opportunity here to demand or demonstrate fiscal responsibility and long-term thinking. Saying no to a road project in the River Valley is not obstruction, it's leadership. It shows that we're willing to apply the same evidence-based scrutiny to transportation projects that we already apply to recreation centers, libraries, and LRT. We can preserve access for people walking, rolling, and biking while choosing not to rebuild unnecessary road space. Thank you for your time this morning and for considering whether this project truly moves us towards our goals.
Thank you. Guest Mary, Richard Mary. Going once.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to read off my presentation that I sent you already off my screen here. And I've modified it a little bit. Watch my time here. Anyways, thanks very much for this opportunity. My name is Richard Mary. I'm mentioned on my letter that I'm with a group called Council of Canadians. As you can see, there's a few other members here. I generally concur, although I'm not representing them as a group. I'll just read what I have here. The NSR value and its tributaries like the Mill Creek, I've used heavily most of my life. I'm a year-round cyclist. I'm in my mid-70s, but I still do that. And I still value these as sacred spaces. The plan to gut, I'm using the word gut here, this section of the Mill Creek for this bridge is apparently well evidenced in this site location study. And it appears to lean towards option 3, where there's a bridge and the redirection of the Mill Creek underneath that bridge. It seems like a good idea in a way, and opens up the waterway, maybe reduces the erosion that I have seen myself quite a bit coming out of the culvert. In any case, the study is backed by 4 qualified biologists, environmental scientists. They make a logical conclusion, at least, that this redirecting of the flow of the Mill Creek underneath this bridge would serve small mammals, allow them to get through. Well, it sounds good in theory, but I would urge you to look at other efforts to do this and how they backfired or didn't work that well. For example, those along the Trans-Canada Highway, the wildlife bridges, they do have their negative aspects. Many more questions could be raised about the ISL report, but in the end, the estimated $22.8 million project really justified on all grounds, environmental, social, or economic. Here's a few points calling for a dismissal of this project to better serve community interests in democracy, environment, and the public interest in general. I understand there have been some public input on this in the community through NGOs that have run around and collected data, but I don't believe that the official public engagement process was adequate. I would like to just make a quick reference back to the Horlack makeover, let's call it, as a comparable example of where public engagement was really totally inadequate. And for those of you that don't know, it was designated as at the lowest level of public engagement, Edmonton's favorite park, shut down for 3 years. I have spoken to professional engineers who would disagree with the main rationale was electrical and plumbing infrastructure changes, and who have said that it was probably not really that essential. Now, 3 years later here, we're still waiting for the reopening of the park. There are other examples in the city I could point to, and I wanted to make some comment on another one along 106th Street between Argyle Road and 51st Avenue, a very large piece of concrete. I cycle through there 3 times a week. I see very few people using the bike path there. All I see is a large chunk of concrete. That's what we're looking at as we look towards another bridge, unneeded bridge over the Mill Creek on 76th Avenue. I have looked into the public engagement process, and I'm not happy about how that process goes. I have talked to the lead public engagement person at the city, and I was told that the decision was made by her. I wonder who makes these decisions in the end. Is it private interests? Well, I don't want to seem like I'm preaching here, but I think the general public generally looks and says, whose interests are being served here? Is it private interests like Inland Cement? Is it big contractors like Chandos Construction? Is it budgets and salaries at City Hall? Well, that's a fact of life. A lot of people look at it this way. In any case, without seeming to be too preachy here, Council, I do appreciate your work and the need for you to balance so many interests. I know it's a very difficult job, but here's an opportunity to prove that these concerns about some sorts of conflict of interest are not justified. Climate warming, concrete,
And
cement
thank you, sorry,
production.
sir. We're at the 5-minute mark there. Our
Okay,
next is Guest Villatard.
Hello. Good morning, Chair and members of Urban Planning Committee. My name is Cheryl, and I'm a resident of King Edward Park. I am here today to speak to the recommendations before you. My concern is that the decision you're being asked to make today, particularly to declare the location of the proposed vehicle bridge as essential, is not supported by sufficient evidence in the materials provided. The information provided in the environmental impact assessment and site location study contains no current vehicle traffic counts, no origin destination data, and no traffic modeling results. They speak in general terms about the roadway's critical role as an east-west connection and how its removal would increase congestion on alternative routes, impacting transit efficiency, emergency response times, and local traffic patterns, but do not quantify those claims. If we are going to permanently commit tens of millions of dollars and lock in another 75 years of car infrastructure at this location, we should have hard numbers, not just general descriptions, to justify it. I want to draw your attention to an important point raised by transportation planner Ray Delahanty in his recent City Nerd YouTube video called "I'm Not Saying Traffic Engineering is Junk Science, But." He explains how traditional traffic modeling often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, further entrenching car dependency, and fails to account for intentional policy and cultural shifts, like our own city plan's stated goal of 50% of trips by transit and active modes by 2030, and the fact that these centrally located neighborhoods are transit and active transportation rich. If the modeling being used here follows the old assumptions, it'll over-predict car demand and under-plan for the modal shift we say we want and are already seeing. Meanwhile, the city states in the summary report that removal of the culvert along with vehicle traffic would redirect vehicles to other surrounding corridors, which I'd argue is exactly what we want to encourage in order to address community members' concerns about shortcutting through these neighborhoods along 76th Avenue. From a cultural perspective, the demographic trends we are seeing should also give us pause. Recent studies and even Edmonton's own market research shows that younger generations and newcomers to the city are less likely to choose driving as their primary mode. If the future population is less car dependent, building another century-scale road bridge may not align with our actual mobility needs. Further, we've seen that people get used to their new route while construction is underway and the road is closed, and then don't revert back to their old habits at the same rate once the road reopens. 102 Avenue downtown is an example of this, with vehicle volumes down 90% after the road reopened. Lastly, the notion that this will be an important road bridge to support a transit route lacks clarity, as the transit plans are far from confirmed at this point in time, and other road options that equally support residents could be explored. For all of these reasons, I urge you not to declare the location of the proposed vehicle bridge essential at this point. Instead, I ask that you direct administration to prepare a report providing current and projected vehicle traffic data for 76th Avenue and nearby crossings, details of any traffic modeling done, including assumptions, scenarios, and whether the city plan's modal shift targets were incorporated, data on current emergency vehicle usage for 76th Avenue through the ravine crossing, and a more thorough analysis of alternative designs for maintaining connectivity with reduced or no private vehicle traffic. This would give council and the public a transparent, evidence-based foundation for such a significant and long-lasting decision. Thank you for your time and for considering the importance of making this decision based on clear and current data. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. So seeing no further speakers in the queue, we'll now go to questions of the speakers. Councillor Knack.
Councillor Jans.
Yes, Mayor Sohi.
Point of order. I think it's important that the speaker who spoke before the last speaker made some unfounded assumptions about conflict of interest. I think it's not appropriate to use this forum to make such assumptions without any evidence. I think that point needs to be noted.
Yep, that is noted. That is in order there, and I guess I'll caution all speakers from if you could refrain from naming any particular folks or companies or anybody else in this forum. You're welcome to do so on your own channels, but not in YouTube on Council Chambers, which is broadcast on YouTube. And certainly, we'd advise anyone about making actionable or unfounded remarks. Thank you, Mayor Sohi. So, going to speakers from the going to questions of the speakers from the public. Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. Thanks, everyone, for coming today. I have sort of two sets of questions, and maybe I'll start with you, guest Villetard, as a resident of the area. Because I think, and this maybe touches on one of the points that was just referenced from one of our previous speakers, is that I think right now some of my struggle is that, I think about, we have a letter in our email from a couple months ago from all 5 community leagues, and community leagues that from my experience are generally ones that are very supportive of active transportation, 15-minute communities, the things we all strive for, the things I've heard most of our speakers today strive for, and yet I still have heard, we have that letter from all 5 community leagues jointly signed saying that they believe this is still important for those communities. And so I guess I want to ask you, as a resident of one of those 5, can you talk to me a little bit about the public engagement process, how your community leagues engage? Because I'm just, that certainly hangs over my head, knowing the actions of these community leagues and how much they strive for creating more complete communities, and yet they're still here asking for that.
Yeah, so I mean, from my knowledge, my own community league for King Edward Park didn't do any, meetings or surveys or anything within our area. I know Avonmore did a survey, but it was open for a very short amount of time. And I would say, the city hasn't released much information about this project in general to the community. So I just don't know that residents were informed enough to even make a recommendation to their community leagues. And the project has just been so rushed that I think the community leagues maybe felt a little heat on it and just kind of didn't want to weigh in on any controversy. And so just felt like the timeline was, it was moving ahead without them regardless. So yeah, I think there's just a lack of information and time for anyone to consider alternatives or and I've heard, I guess, some misinformation from community members thinking the design is going to give them one thing, and I don't know that that's necessarily true.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, because I think, Mr. Jakes, you and I were in the Avonmore AGM a couple months ago, and I do believe there had been some incorrect information circulating at the time from some community members, but I also remember sitting through that, and I guess I wouldn't, there was a whole presentation by the project team. Again, I'm sort of, this is my struggle, is that I feel like I heard from a lot of residents who live in that community who even though very much are active, like want all of these great things that we all sort of share common vision on, and yet we're still there saying like this is an important connection point for us. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on, you sat in that same meeting, if you had a different interpretation than I did at that Avonmore AGM or other engagement that has happened.
Yeah, for sure. So I would echo some of Cheryl's comments that, I think a lot of people's gut reaction would be, I drive over this sometimes, and I can't imagine a world where it's closed. Like, many people would support removing lanes from roads if they're active transportation, but not removing the road in general. But I think with more time, people will have a chance to marinate on this and come around to it a little more. And even with that, I think just having the conversation, even if fundamentally the support isn't there at the end of the day, I think this is a very important conversation to have with community members because we're facing, I think it was $1.8 billion in infrastructure deficit that's coming up in the next budget cycle, and it's just growing and growing, and we need to tackle this at a more underlying level. So I think we need to have people thinking about these things.
Last question, Mr. Kwong, Pass for People perspective, how does 82nd Ave renewal fit into this or not? Because I am a little worried about if we want to really revamp 82nd Avenue, White Avenue, and you do this, I'm going to run out of time. I will come back for a second round and ask you a question about our overall goals for White Avenue, and how this might or might not impact the ability to get that job done on White Avenue that I think all of us are very interested in, but maybe not everyone is. So I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Councillor Wright.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jakes, you'd said that it only benefits people if they are driving, but the road bridge, but that's also going to have a shared use path. And for those in wheelchairs or have strollers, would that not be more accessible for them to use rather than the trestle bridge?
Possibly. I think that's kind of part of where more information comes in. Like, for example, if the trestle bridge is very bumpy, maybe that's not a good way to go. But currently, the sidewalk on the north side of 76 Ave connects directly to the trestle bridge. So that is already a good path. So if the path were preserved, the trestle bridge could be used for sure for walking and rolling and anything active.
Okay, so it's currently connected to the trestle bridge, but if the trestle bridge is being replaced, don't we need to have a new connector to that sidewalk?
Yes, which could be part of that new trestle bridge. I'm not sure I fully understand. I should also clarify that right now, for example, if we close down the trestle bridge, because there are apparently erosion issues with that, people can still use the sidewalk along 76 Ave. And for example, we rebuild the trestle bridge, connect it up with the path, and that we don't need a full-on road bridge to maintain that connection, from my perspective.
So just have a shared use path connected to the trestle bridge and no road. It kind of just hanging in air there. And I'm going to ask administration why they, you know, after the consultations that was done on the trestle bridge, then why, sort of what led them to decide that the road needs to be replaced. So I'll ask them those questions. Okay. I just want to go, Christine, I guess you had indicated that there wasn't any consultation with in regards to the road bridge, just the trestle bridge, right? With the River Valley Alliance? Or sorry, River Valley Coalition? Christine Kowalchuk, are you there? Did you leave? Is there anybody else from ERVCC that might be able to answer? What I want to know is what sort of level of consultation was done. I think in the report from admin, it talks about that after consultation with some groups, it was decided that the culvert needed to be redone. No one there? Okay. I guess for my last couple of minutes then, I will ask Mr. Mayor.
All of us, sorry, Rocky here.
Okay.
I don't think there was any consultation on the road bridge. Let me just ask my husband. It was, I mean, the consultation was around the trestle bridge. There wasn't consultation around the road bridge.
Okay. Okay. That was my understanding from previous emails and conversations. Okay. But I'm just wondering, had you brought up, had the group brought up about the culvert needing to be redesigned?
Well, I can maybe speak to that because okay. I was in a meeting with the project team where we had raised the issue of the scour erosion on the north side of the bridge due to the culvert being too narrow for the maximum flow of the bridge. And at that time, the project team said that the culvert still had about 20 years left on its life cycle. And so they wouldn't consider replacing it at the same time as just because of they were replacing the trestle bridge.
Okay.
And yeah, and it was a few months after that meeting when my understanding is that they discovered that the culvert was beginning to crack.
Okay, so upon further inspection, that 20 years was no more. Okay,
right.
Not available. Okay, my time is just about up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
Thank you everyone for taking time to be here today. Hope you all have wonderful summer. So my first question goes to Miss Jack. Are you still there?
Yes, Christy Jackson.
Yeah, yes. Jackson, Miss Jackson. So I just look at the name on your screen. Yes. So my question is, because today in front of committee and is approval or recommendation to council for approval is about the environmental impact assessment and also site location study. So what I heard from your presentation So there is a lack of some information, lack of some like sufficient engagement. So before this work has been done, these two like assessment and the study done, have you already know the information about the project, or you did not know the project at all, or those today is the first time and for you to know better? So I would like to understand that from engagement, public engagement perspective. So which level the understanding public at this point? And because right now we need recommended to council to approve this study, the work is already done in front of us.
Right. Well, I had heard for Paths for People consideration for naturalization of the area. So that was my entry point to learn about this. This was months ago in the winter, and we waited for the site assessment study and the environmental assessment study to come out, and we reviewed that. I guess the new piece to me was that the River Valley area redevelopment plan, that there is that section of that plan. It's 4.3.2, and it's encouraging City Council to actually look for opportunities to restore lands that are used for transportation that are within the river valley. And so this just feels like the perfect opportunity where, sure, people are using it and it looks essential, but maybe more study needs to be done about whether there's any truth to that, about whether it really is essential and the other roads couldn't take that pressure.
Okay, so thank you for that point, actually. So what I heard, just let me know if my understanding correct here. So there is a gap there, and from River Valley plan and this assessment. So that is what I heard. So what's your suggestion is to ask a council to do more consultation? So the outcome for that consultation, so are you going to try to looking for something to fill that gap? Or what are you specifically looking for? Because I heard from other speakers talk about, so right now the key point, argument point here is, do we have sufficient consultation? If we have, this is number one. Number two, if we have sufficient consultation, and then do you still feel the site, the location for the bridge, everything still the problem or not? And then if still the problem, so this type of question, has those type of question asked at the first place, and when before our city move forward to do those environment impact assessment and site location study. So that's what I try to think in, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think some of the other speakers had really specific requests about the extra information we need to make a good decision. I don't have those quite at the top of my head, but I think we know we need more information to make a good, and just that this whole thing seems rather rushed. I think they wanted to get shovels in the ground this summer, fall, and really, I just think it's rushed, and this is a long-term project and needs better consideration. And once we have the information, to consult. That's what I'm asking for, a pause. Yeah.
Thank you. So I have 30 seconds. Any speakers welcome to jump in if you have comments on my questions. So I didn't say anybody, and then I will return to the chair. Yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Knack.
Thanks again, Councillor Chance. Sorry, so I'll go to Mr. Kwong. I sort of led with the question at the end. Just as a quick refresher, the question on what I'm wondering about is, you know, obviously there's a desire to do a pretty full-scale renewal and a transformation, I think, of White Avenue. And I think part of that conversation will include, you know, if you're going to change that, you know, put in dedicated bus lanes and have BRT, and you turn that into a one-lane road and you know, significantly transform how that operates, then we have to look at parallel roadways and to help make sure we're managing that shift. And so I guess I just wanted to take a moment and get a sense from Paths for People's perspective, if you view those two things as connected, or if you view them independently of one another.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Knack. I was given the grace of having some extra minutes to think about this your question. But I'm afraid it might not have done me any good. I will admit I'm not intimately familiar with how these two projects may interplay with each other. I think one thing that most of the speakers here today may agree on is that an updated traffic study for just this sort of thing would do us all some good. I think the last traffic study that I'm aware of was around 2016, give or take. It cited about 4,000 cars using this part of the road each day. I think it's safe to say that traffic patterns may very well have changed since pre-pandemic. And if I may offer my instinct, it would be that if we were to renaturalize this space, Councillor Wright is correct that there is a wide sidewalk multi-use path in the latest version of the car bridge design that I've seen. That is just about as wide as the current one is, and it's a monolithic design, which means there's no, for at least the section, at least part of the section, it's unprotected from the roadway. And I can say from personal experience that I'm not very comfortable riding a bike down there, and I wouldn't be very comfortable pushing a stroller down that part of the road either. So if we were to renaturalize this space to make it a green space with multi-use paths and no vehicle traffic, I would anticipate that a large amount of trips specifically between some of these communities that are adjacent, if they are just those origins and destinations inside these communities, will active transportation modes and alternative modes will be facilitated, bringing down the vehicle traffic demand even further than we expect that it may be. And with the types of changes you're citing on White Ave, I think that similarly, the types of trips that are in and around that area, this will be something that just encourages more of a shift to alternative modes, and the types of through traffic, maybe more commercial or industrial types of through traffic that we're looking to put through. I don't think those are the types of trips that we're looking to run through on 76th Ave as a collector road anyways. So that would be my instinct.
No, that's helpful. And again, I'll ask administration around this because I don't know if it's unfair to conflate the two. And make it sort of seem like an either or. But if that is potentially one of the challenges, and this is what I'm trying to navigate, I view White Ave as such a critical priority because that road just is not people friendly, and so if there's a way to, I'm just trying to see if I need to consider them both at the same time, or if in fact it's not valid. So appreciate your insight. I just wanted to toss that your way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This concludes questions of members of the public. Thank you so much for your presentations today and sharing your questions. We'll now move to questions of administration. Councillor Knack.
Thanks, Councillor Jans. I don't even know how I clicked on in time for that. That's good. So I'll go to. So I want to ask. Yeah, I guess I'll start with just that last series of questions because do you view those two projects in any way as a connection point? Because I think there is a long-term vision for White Ave to significantly transform how it operates today. And do you see 76th Ave as something that would impact how we could or couldn't do that?
So, Councillor Knack, I'll start, and then I'll turn it over to Natalie and Joanne to fill the blanks. I would just like to say that all of the road network, we need to consider the entire road network when we make these types of decisions. And so absolutely there is a strong link between White Avenue crossing the Mill Creek Ravine and 76th Avenue crossing the Mill Creek Ravine. Those are extremely close tied roads, and that we need to consider them when we look at what we're planning to do for White Ave, and then taking that into consideration. But overall, it's all of the crossings around Mill Creek, the connections east-west that are really important to look at, and to ensure that we have the proper mobility network for all of our users across that barrier, which is Mill Creek. And so we want to make sure that when we consider it in its globality. But I'll turn it over to Natalie to talk a little bit more about the White Ave and what it could do to 76.
Thanks, Pascal.
So we are in the midst of planning the mass transit corridor along White Avenue, and so that's something that's very live in our minds and in our thinking as we're planning the work here along 76th Avenue. In the case of the work that we're doing now on 76th, Pascal really captured it quite well, that we're looking at the full ravine and all of the crossings together. And so we have upcoming construction work that will happen along White Avenue when we do the mass transit work, or even when we do the future bridge rehabilitation along 82 Avenue, because not in the next budget cycle, but likely in a budget cycle to follow, there will be bridge renewal to happen along there as well. And so we're looking at all of those connections and ensuring that we're providing that adequate network connectivity for folks to be able to get to and from their destinations, and looking at it not only from what there is there today and what disruptions might exist during this work, but also what we need for future construction activities. And that redundancy across the Mill Creek Ravine for vehicular traffic is quite important in that.
Now, I'm going to argue with myself for a moment, for fun here, is to say 76th Ave, it is a collector road. You know, I've typically biked down that road myself. It should not be a road that we want to see 20,000 cars a day on. We put in significant traffic calming. I mean, I think about the intersection right at Kind and the whole Ritchie Market area there. So I guess I want to ask, sort of in opposition to myself for a moment, is if you're creating that redundancy because we are looking to update White Avenue and likely transform that into a significant BRT corridor, we would probably not want to see any vehicle traffic that would for any number of reasons choose to no longer use White Ave to shift to 76th Ave. We would prefer them likely to go to a different roadway that is more, you know, an arterial road, I'm guessing, correct?
Absolutely. We are treating 76th Avenue as the collector that it is and that it's meant to be in the long term. We aren't adding capacity through this work that we're doing. The 76th Avenue Bridge will replace the single lane in each direction that exists today. The big addition that will happen is that shared pathway that you were speaking about on the north side. So we're adding capacity for pedestrians and cyclists and those who choose to roll to cross there and to tie into the future 76th Avenue renewal plans east and west of there.
Okay.
Councillor Knack, I would just make the distinction between like commuter vehicles, where of course we encourage them to stay on arterials, and all of the detour when we need to close 82nd Avenue, we'll be directing vehicles to arterial roadways. But 76th Avenue as a collector will be really important for access to the neighborhoods that are around that area. And so from that perspective, while we wouldn't be diverting commuter traffic to 76, it would be essential or vital for the community to maintain that connection across the Mill Creek.
I might have more questions. I'm out of time now. Thank you.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you very much. Oh, I have lots of questions. So there was no traffic counts done as part of this?
There were counts done, yes. So we have regular counts that are done as part of our regular program, and we do have recent counts that were done on 76th Avenue.
And what are those? I'm sorry, did I miss it in the report? Or?
Some of the presenters shared some of that information, but we're in and around 5,000 to 6,000 vehicles.
Okay, so that is what we're seeing. So, and then to have that traffic diverted either to Argyle or 82nd Ave, because I think some of the comments were that it would save on operational costs, but if we're still having those drivers using other roads, that would deteriorate those roads quicker, correct?
It's a complicated answer around operational costs. We have to recognize that not having infrastructure would remove an operational cost. That is true. You're right that it would push maintenance costs potentially higher to other roadways. But in the consideration of it, like, we have a culvert that we're replacing with a bridge, and so from that perspective, we are basically keeping our operational and maintenance costs relatively the same as it is now.
Okay, and the decision for the culvert, who did we hear from? Was it Rocky that talked about 20 years left, and then it was determined or found out that there wasn't that lifespan left?
It's an old culvert. It's been on our radar for some time, and we have significant operations and maintenance challenges associated with it today, including debris clearing and erosion and slope stability issues related to it today. So we're quite well aware of that, and we're aware of this as we were embarking on the Trestle Bridge project. So when we were working on that Trestle Bridge project, and as we developed the plan, it became very, very apparent that these two locations are quite intertwined. We can't do the Trestle Bridge work without impacting the slope at 76th Avenue, and so doing this work together, including the culvert replacement, makes the most sense and is most cost effective, because if we were to come in and do this later, it would cost us significantly more.
Okay, and Mr. Jake had mentioned about the sidewalk on the north side of the road. Is that possible to just maintain that with the new trestle bridge? Or you need the full road, I guess, to support that?
In terms of there is a slip kind of connection informally between the road and the bridge today. We will be formalizing that as well, so you will be able to travel between one and the other, whether you're on the Mill Creek trestle or on 76th Avenue, but we are providing for both in this case.
Okay, but you would still, if you just kept a sidewalk there, you would still need a bridge and support and diverting the culvert and the creek and everything.
Yes.
Okay. I've still got a couple more minutes. The cost. I know there's funds have been set aside for the Trestle Bridge in the 23-26 budget. Have funds been allocated as well for the new roadway bridge?
Yes. So the funding for the trestle replacement as well as the road bridge have both been approved recently by council in the spring of this year. So they were part of our bridge renewal program and on our radar. One thing to keep in mind, and I want to put it out there as well, if we were to not replace the culvert and to remove 76th Avenue, there is a cost associated with that, and it is significant. The removal of the road and the naturalization of that area, if we were not to replace the culvert with a bridge, is upwards of $13 million. So it's not an insignificant ask to just eliminate that connection. There is a cost that would be incurred to do so.
Okay. I do have some questions for Sarah, and I'll come back for another round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice.
Thank you for the reports and also the presentation. So my first question is about what we heard from public speakers today indicated this project is not essential, but by review the reports and then I noticed, and from administration perspective, this is essential. So can you help me have better understanding what is the what is the cost for this different understanding? And we think is essential, but public speakers today say that, no, this is not essential.
Yeah. Maybe we can start, and then we'll see if Sarah can jump in. I think, Councillor Rice, what you're asking is about
so
how we define essential, basically.
Yeah. So
right?
what casts this different understanding?
Yeah. And I think it's something that as we look to determine if a infrastructure is essential, we look at what the broader benefit to the city and to Edmontonians it would bring. And so in the perspective that were taken into account in the deeming the bridge essential, we talk about connectivity, we talk about mobility, we talk about what the connection is for local traffic as well as a collector road and how it serves the broader network, as well as bringing forward enhanced pedestrian and cyclist and then connection as well. Everything that we do related to the project was about enhancing the natural habitat and environment around it. And so by removing the culvert, by delighting the creek, we are supporting really improving the area, reducing our concerns over erosion, which have been created by and some of the speakers have spoken to this, the over-engineering of the creek, right? And so we are taking steps to renaturalize. Now, I can't speak for the speakers, but I think we've heard that from their perspective, the roadway connection is not essential because they do not believe that it is needed as part of the road network. And this is where I think we have different perspectives that were brought forward. I don't know if Sarah wants to add anything related to how we evaluate essential.
So, and I just want to, before Sarah jumps in, this is just Jesse from law. I just want to clarify that what council is being asked, or committee being asked to recommend to council, is that the location of the bridge in the river valley is essential, not the project. And so I just wanted to just pop in and make sure council is clear on that distinction.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, thank you. So the next question is about the budget. So the budget is already approved in 2023-2026 budget cycle. So what is total cost for this project?
The total cost of the project is 22.8 million, and the standalone profile was approved at the spring 2025 SCBA.
Because right now this project is close to reach the checkpoint 3 right now. So how much? Yeah, how much expenditures already occurred at this point?
We'll take a look and we can come back to that question.
Okay, so why I'm asking this question, because if public say we should pass this and to do more consultation to find more information. So if this pass, and I want to know how much money already occurred, expenditure already occurred, and then of the total budget.
So Councillor Rice, we estimate that it's about 1.5 million that would have been expended to date.
Okay, it's compared to the $22 million in total. Okay, so this schedule. So another question is about the schedule. What's the plan for this project, a specific schedule? And then if we move forward for the checkpoint 3 at this point, so what is timeline to completion?
So just for clarity, we've already reached checkpoint 3, and so the project is now in delivery phase. I'll turn it over to Sam Elmotar. He can speak to the project schedule.
Yeah, good morning, Council. We are ready to tender in September for construction, and this project is expected to start in winter 2025 and carry on through 2026 with the expected completion date of December 2026.
Okay, thank you. That's my time to turn to you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Mayor Sohi.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. What will be the impact on the wildlife movement during construction, and would it be improved after the construction if this project goes through?
So maybe I'll step in on that one. During construction, we expect there to be sort of impacts of limited time, limited duration. Following construction, we would see an improvement in wildlife mobility. And the big reason for that is that we're moving away from a culvert, which has constrained movement, to a bridge design, which will allow for more movement on the edges as well as to the creek itself.
Because it's constrained there now. When you go there, you see the little culvert, and so that will open up the space underneath the bridge and make it more wider. That's my understanding.
Correct.
Okay. And the deeming it essential, the movement of people, goods, services, movement of people, goods, and services through various modes of transportation is one of the factors determining if a project and its impact on the river valley is essential or not.
So I think to Ms. Inkpen's point earlier, within the River Valley ARP, we look at whether the location within that is essential. So we look at social community impacts, we look at the environmental impacts, we look at institutional impacts, but we don't look at the broader need for the bridge. That's not part of the considerations. I think it's whether if the bridge needs to go, where the best place would be to put it. And within that, the existing bridge footprint would be the least destructive location that we had looked at.
Oh, I see. Okay. And does it take more space, the new bridge?
Mayor Soe,
The foundations and the it's not being widened. I mean,
No,
you have to improve the access for sidewalk and make it wider, because now the current sidewalk is so much adjacent to 76 Avenue. It's not really safe for people to for strollers and wheelchairs to actually go on it.
Yeah, so Mayor, so you're correct. Like, we're not widening the bridge for road use. We are widening what is currently a road, and the bridge will have a slightly larger footprint because of the shared use path. But Joanna will speak to details.
Yeah, the road bridge itself is not going to be wider than the existing, but the Mill Creek pedestrian pad bridge is going to be a little bit wider because we are going to be widening it to meet the new design standard.
Okay, but it's still a single lane in each direction, right?
Absolutely, that's correct. And then to speak to your question about the footings, like, it will be a very different environment because, as you mentioned, right now it's a culvert with like build-up slopes around the culvert, and so the bridge will have footings in the Mill Creek, but they will be much wider and will provide for much more of that space for the creek and the bed around it.
Yeah. Okay. My last question: what is the like, if you don't move ahead, what are the immediate risks?
The immediate risk is for the trestle bridge, like the pedestrian trestle bridge, which is in need of replacement as soon as possible. I'll let Natalie speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, to Pascal's point, the trestle bridge needs to be replaced as quickly as possible. It's currently in a state where it's at its end of life cycle, and so our servicing of this bridge currently is basically centered around that. And so there is things like debris removal that has to happen in the area to keep it safe. But it is, if we do not act on that bridge replacement in the near term, there's a good chance that we'll have to shut it down.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Sohi. Council Wright.
Thank you very much. I guess, Sarah, what's the environmental impact if we postpone this decision or delay it? Because I am concerned, like the erosion and slope stability. How urgent is that to be addressed?
So that may be a better question for IIS. So we reviewed the impacts that were there, but not the scenario if we just allowed them to continue without doing maintenance work to improve this.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit, Councillor Wright, to that. So I think what we shared earlier was that replacing the trestle bridge requires us to remove the culvert and solve and bring forward solutions to help with the erosion, the severe erosion issues that we have in that part of Mill Creek. And so the longer we delay, as Natalie was just mentioning, we will likely have to close the trestle bridge because of the continued deterioration of the existing infrastructure. And then we are unlikely to move forward with its replacement until we have a decision or a way forward regarding the culvert. And so delaying this approval will delay the project and ultimately put us in a state of that we would just be waiting for a decision, and most likely will continue erosion, we'll lose the active pathway connection, and then we'll be continuing with the operational expenses related to cleaning up the debris.
Okay, and closing the trestle bridge would then force people onto that very narrow sidewalk on 76th Ave, which wouldn't necessarily be safe for
It would definitely, would require cyclists to dismount and, have some very legitimate kind of concern related to the amount of traffic, foot traffic that could be on that narrow sidewalk.
And for clarity, there isn't really a sidewalk that's there today. It's I wouldn't consider that to be really a good connection for folks. That would replace what's currently being facilitated via the trestle bridge. This is a very narrow curb line walk along 76th Avenue that isn't comfortable for users at all.
Been down there, not necessarily good for, or wide enough for, safely for a wheelchair or stroller.
Exactly.
I'm just also wondering, will there be any barrier between the shared use path and the roadway?
At present, we're not planning a barrier. We're just finalizing the design at the moment. It's a very wide shared pathway along 76th Avenue, so similar to what you'd see as a curb line walk, but it's wider. And so the experience, because of the wider walk, will be more comfortable even with the absence of a barrier, but it's something that's being finalized at the moment.
Okay. And I think it was it Christine Kowalczyk that talked about that there's been no Indigenous consultation on this. Why?
There has been Indigenous engagement. We have met with the Enoch First Nation in Q2 of this year, and we are also sending out letters to the rest of the Indigenous nations just to offer the opportunity for them to meet should they want to learn more about the project.
Okay, and I guess did Enoch have any concerns?
No, they have not expressed concerns with the replacement project.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, how come that wasn't noted in the report? Or did I miss it? I'm sorry if I did.
It was not included in the report specifically because the meeting was only held earlier this year, and at the time that we were preparing the report, that meeting wasn't in place yet, so that's why that information wasn't available.
Okay, so I think, things like the Indigenous consultation, the transportation stats, if maybe some of that information had been included in the report, it might have helped to dispel some of the concerns that have been expressed today.
Noted. Okay. And like Jesse mentioned, it's because it's not directly related to the EIA or the SLS, but we understand that with the concerns being brought forward, it could have been helpful.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And my time is almost. Oh, the artifacts, the historical. I guess. What's the expectation? I don't know what sort of. There have been some that have been found previously. I thought I read in.
I'm not sure. David, is that something you can speak to?
Not directly. I mean, as part of any project like this in the River Valley, there's on-site investigation and monitoring that's vetted through Alberta Culture, and there would be reports that have been provided for the clearance from the province.
Okay, okay. My time is up. I thought I'd read something.
And for clarity, we do have our clearance from Alberta Culture.
Thank you. Councillor Knack.
Councillor Tang for first round.
Sorry, Councillor Tang.
Thank you. Did Pascal, can you just clarify, this bridge is at the end of its life, but didn't a few years ago it went under like a replacement or rehabilitation?
Just Councillor Tang, just to be clear, you're referring to the pedestrian bridge?
Yeah.
There were definitely repairs that have been done over the years. I believe the decking might have been replaced 10 or 15 years ago or some. Yeah, and punctual repairs. What hasn't been touched is really the support structure for the deck, and this is where the major issues are. It's with some of the beams that support the bridge are no longer touching the ground, actually. Yeah.
Oh, I see. So the sort of the walking surface and some of the metal support kind of above are relatively fresh, but the bottom pieces, the pieces that will be supporting the walking portions are.
Those are the ones that are showing the most issues, exactly.
Right. And then this is exacerbated through the erosion that you're talking about, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this has been a really interesting conversation. And can you just like summarize for me the consequence of not approving what's on the table today?
If the SLS and EIA are not approved, we cannot move forward with the project.
And the consequence of not moving forward with the project would mean?
Would mean that most likely in the coming, in a short term, we would have to close the trestle bridge because of the safety issues that are under right now. The bridge is safe. I want to make sure that that's clear, but we are monitoring it very closely. And for example, next spring, when we have runoffs and more erosion coming in, it could impact the bridge to a point that we're no longer able to deem it safe.
Right, so it has implication for safety down the road and also access into the neighborhoods.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the summary. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Tang. Councillor Knack.
Thanks, Councillor Jansen. Sorry, I stepped out for just a minute. So just in case, I wanted to just double check because, again, I'm hearing the conversation on engagement. I think some questions have been asked, but like your teams were. So can you walk me through how did you engage each of the 5 communities that did send us that letter?
So I'll turn it to Joanna for the details. What I wanted to highlight is that we engage, like the public engagement principles of the city is that we engage when there is a possibility for the public to influence a decision. And in this case, when we started the project, it was understood that we would replace the trestle bridge, that we would maintain that active connection. And as Natalie was mentioning, through the review of the trestle bridge, its context, we determined that we needed to remove the culvert and then put forward a solution that would allow us to replace the trestle bridge. And so from that perspective, we had no point of engagement with the public that would allow for them to influence a decision. We engaged with the public on specific elements related to environmental benefits, things like that. And then once ideas of removing the connection, the vehicular connection came up, that's when the community communications kind of started to ramp up. And then Joanna can speak to what they've done since then.
So as Pascal has mentioned, the project originally started with us only taking a look at the replacement of the existing Mill Creek pedestrian trestle bridge, and that was in 2022. And the first set of meetings with some of the interested parties and area community leagues happened in early 2023, and that was to introduce the project and to let them know what we are working on as part of the replacement project. And later on, as Natalie and Pascal had mentioned, we conducted additional work on the culvert assessment. And through the findings, we learned that we do need to replace the culvert. And we had follow-up meetings with some of the interested parties and community leagues to share that information in 2024. So that information was shared, and at the time that we met, we didn't hear the specific concerns about maintaining the 76 Ave connection, but it was later on, after some of those meetings were wrapped up, then we started getting some of the communication asking us to take a look at the additional information.
Okay. So, again, I'm overly simplifying. There's no way to replace the trestle bridge. There's no technical. I'm not an expert, so I'm relying on you've done multiple different versions of technical analysis that show there is no way to replace that trestle bridge without doing something, without updating the culvert. Now, maybe it doesn't have to look exactly. The culvert doesn't necessarily have to be a road connection that create the road like that, right? You could have a pedestrian corridor if you wanted, but you would still need something there to address the other component.
I think the main thing, and I'll let Natalie confirm, is that we need to remove the culvert and work on the slope stability issues. Yeah. The solution for that could look very different with or without a road connection. Yeah. Absolutely.
Is there anything, so maybe I'm just thinking about the future, because I hear the questions, but I'm also aware of the community leagues that have sent this, but I hear, did everyone get engaged? there'd be nothing stopping us in the future, thinking out loud, if there was a robust community-led engagement process between the community leagues, other groups that have been here today, to say maybe that in the future they decide they don't want that roadway connection, and they could talk about that. We've done that in some communities where we've had traffic diverters that have essentially stopped somebody from using it as a throughway. Now, I don't know if that would solve everything we've heard from speakers today, but that is something that could be explored as we continue to do mass transit modeling. If we determine 76th Ave is not necessary, if we see traffic patterns not shifting and community comes forward and ultimately says, you know what, maybe we really don't need that road to be a connection, and we want to just turn that into a shared pathway for everyone.
Absolutely, and the transportation network, pardon me, is really something that evolves with time. So as mass transit does take and as people shift more, or as travel patterns change, or the world changes overall, the network does evolve, and things like removal of connections is something that we do look at on a regular basis. We do take seriously adding a new bridge to our inventory to replace the culvert that's already in our inventory. And so over time, if the community does see that their patterns are changing and the need for 76th Avenue is no longer, there is nothing that would prevent that from being removed from the network. However, there are, again, as I mentioned earlier, costs associated with that.
Okay, I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can just jump on the board, can I go to Ms. Inkpen again? Thank you. Just want to clarify here. So I'll just say it this way. What is the question we are voting on today?
Yeah, so Council, under Councillor Jans, under the ARP, in order for construction to proceed on this project, Council is being asked to approve the SLS, the EIA, as well as deem the location of the project in the River Valley as essential. So those are the three items that are being asked for committee to recommend to Council.
Okay, and the reason we have to deem it essential is because of the River Valley bylaw. Anything that cannot be, anything that has to be done in the River Valley has to be deemed essential to proceed. Is that correct?
Under Council's bylaw, in order for something to proceed to construction, if it meets certain criteria, which this does, deemed essential is one of the things that needs to be obtained prior to proceeding with construction.
Okay. I think so. I thank my committee members for asking almost all the questions I had. I did want to just clarify some of the some city staff have been at community league meetings in the last 12 months. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
And could you share sort of what your experience was or what you heard?
So one example, we were at the Avonmore AGM a few months ago, and there was a really good turnout of folks from the community. There was a bit of mixed feedback, some of which you heard today, but we also heard from a number of community members that they do that they would like to see 76th Avenue, the road connection, continue into the future, and they were happy to see the bridge project coming forward.
Did anyone go to the Argyle Community League? Because I think we've talked about traffic redirection, and one concern I've heard that hasn't been articulated is about 66th Avenue, that there could be potentially overflow issues onto 66, and there's already some speeding and traffic issues highlighted in Argyle. I'm not sure if that flow assessment has come up or not.
I believe there's been some discussions with some of our colleagues in city operations about that, but I don't have the specifics at my fingertips.
Okay. Either way, that's probably a secondary conversation about how we do traffic calming there. So really, there's the three questions. Given the environmental impact assessment, is that satisfactory to the committee? Secondly, given the site location study, is this location correct? And if not, the site location study looked at a couple of other locations, including no location at all, and again recommends this location and this procedure. And third, given the first two, the final question is this allowed to proceed under the River Valley bylaw, which is the essential designation? Is that sort of what we're looking at here?
I would just say, Councillor, the only thing I would adjust is that third piece is, given those first two, is a location in the River Valley essential, and that's what Council is being asked to deem that it is.
Okay. All right. I'm just trying to. I understand as well, just on the engagement side, that community groups had distributed flyers through some of the neighborhoods. I personally have knocked on the door of every single family home between 82nd Avenue and 63rd Avenue, and I did hear mixed feedback as well too. I heard a couple of people who said this, I'd love to see a dead end at the 76, and I've heard from some other people who are quite animated in their opposition to such an idea. So, yeah, I think that's all my questions. So with that then, Councillor Rice.
Okay, so many questions, and some of my questions already answered. So last question I heard my colleagues ask, if this move forward, and then this did not move forward, what's the risk? So my question is about because we heard some concern, and then so right now we have to make a decision this recommended to council or not, and if it's move forward, is the way and how we move forward to implement this project will be enough to address the concern we heard from the public members today. And then I believe you heard also. And so this is, I try to get a sense from you. So is all those information, is all those procedures, and then move forward, and then we have enough plan, or we have enough actions and to address the concern, and we heard from public speakers.
Councillor Rice, it's a tough question because I think there is a fundamental difference of opinions or perspective. We are going to be replacing the culvert with a roadway bridge, which means that the project maintains that connection, which you've heard from some speakers that they do not agree with that. But I do believe that when it comes to the efforts that we're making towards naturalization, daylighting the creek, improving the environmental health of the creek through removing that culvert and replacing it with a structure that would allow for the creek to flow much more naturally, that we are making we're taking steps towards renaturalizing to a certain degree Mill Creek. There are many other instances that need to be tackled, as some of the speakers have mentioned, and we're not going to that extent, but for this area, it will make a substantial difference in the environmental context.
Okay, so in my previous question, we talk about the benefits, broad benefits for the entire city. Can you, from that perspective, provide some your comments?
Yeah, so I think it goes to what I just shared around making the creek healthier and ensuring that we are tackling the erosion issues, which will allow trails to be maintained and wildlife to have access to the connection there that is right now very constrained, as Sarah was mentioning. I'll see Natalie might want to jump in.
Beyond the ecological benefits that the daylighting of the creek will provide, the new bridge on 76th Avenue also provides for a district connector shared pathway that will enable folks to travel in different ways that they can't currently along 76th Avenue. And again, that'll tie into some of the future work that will come through the neighborhood renewal processes.
Okay. Thank you. That's my question.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rice. Okay, hearing no further questions of administration, we'll then, I guess, who selected the item? Is that Councillor Wright? Do you want to move the recommendation?
Sure, I will move that the Urban Planning Committee recommend to City Council that the Mill Creek Trestle Bridge B034 and culvert under 76 Ave B038 replacement environmental impact assessment and site location study as outlined in attachments 1 and 2 of the June 17th, 2025 Integrated Infrastructure Services Report IIS 02807 be approved pursuant to the North Saskatchewan River Valley Area Redevelopment Plan Bylaw 7188. and that the location of the proposed road bridge and Mill Creek realignment in the river valley is outlined in attachment 2 of the June 17, 2025 Integrated Infrastructure Services Report be deemed essential pursuant to the North Saskatchewan River Valley Area Redevelopment Plan Bylaw 7188.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll open to committee remarks.
I'll wait to close.
Hearing none. Okay, Councillor Knack.
Thanks, Councillor Jans. I think the only reason my gut says that we should be doing this, and I'm really like I'm trying. I have a lot of time for our folks who came to speak today. I'm not sure I'm seeing the same thing that others are seeing who've spoken today. I think I appreciate it might be somewhat technically feasible to do an update to all of this without adding in specifically a car bridge, which I just saw a nodding head from our administration on. I like this isn't a bridge on a, I don't know, I get this is a collector road that operates very, very differently. It's very low volume on a road that's very much been designed to limit traffic flow. So I'm not sure I see how this sort of moves us down the path that I think a number of groups have raised of being, exclusively car oriented. I think about the work that Pastor People has done and other groups have done to try to make sure we're shifting, and we have a significantly bigger conversation coming on White Avenue that I think needs to be addressed if we're really meaningfully going to have that type of conversation. But I don't see how this is contributing to that type of sort of exclusive car focus that I think some of our speakers have raised concerns about. So appreciating that, I think in the long term, if there, and I do keep coming back to, and I appreciating one of our speakers who is a resident there, I sat through that AGM and talked to a lot of people after that AGM, and I did not, I've been chatting with folks in that area and even just west in Ritchie, and I did not hear the same. Well, rather, I think what I heard fairly strongly from most of those residents is a desire to still have that connectivity from a group of communities that is very actively in desire of more active transportation, more mobility options, and so I take that letter pretty seriously too, because again, all of those community leagues are not ones that are focused on driving. I think our data would show they have a much higher percentage of folks that use alternative modes, and yet we still had that come through. So so I think, at some point, and I will flag, I think one thing that really jumped out at me in that letter, and this is maybe just a broader sort of flag is for all community groups, is that I remember in that March letter, they talked about feeling like they hadn't had the opportunity to engage with some of the groups that had made the suggestion of maybe closing it down. And I think that immediately put folks into a feeling like they needed to take a position versus saying, hey, we have this idea, let's go talk to some of the community leagues who have a lot of representation and a lot of folks who are interested in this. So I really trying to hear everyone on this one, but I also have to think about the voices that I heard in the other spots, and obviously I'll take a lot of I'll put a lot of weight into both of the ward councillors who represent communities on either side, and to date I'm not really hearing from either councillor that they would like to pause this or defer this, also based off their conversations with their local residents. So for those reasons, I'm willing to support this recommendation to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Councillor Wright.
I'm to close.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and for all the work administration get done, and also all the public speakers. For me, for this recommendation to council, so I'm going to support the recommendation to council. The similar reason as Councillor Knack mentioned, I would like to get the comments, thoughts, or inputs on this specific item from the ward representative, the councillor in that area, to give them opportunity to weigh in. But through my questions, yes, I still little bit struggling and how we balance the broad benefits and for the city and from long-term perspective, and also to look at the impact and for the neighborhood, and also the risk, how we mitigate the risk. I heard the answer to the question about if we did not move this, the risk is we have to cross the bridge and for the certain sense. So I do not want the community to lose the connection and to use this beautiful area. And no matter it's from environmental perspective and also from easy access perspective. So I still find that balance is important for us to figure out. That is why I ask a question, if we move forward, is there any way we could address the concern and how we balance the risk and also the benefits? So I would like to take this opportunity to go to the council to hear more councillors' inputs on that. Another thing I want just to put here as a reminder, and because I believe many of my colleagues, and including myself, we heard over and over, and in our engagement, interaction, and with the people we represent, and talk about the scheduling of our city's infrastructure project. People do not want to see the project to be open or to be operated, to be delivered at the same time. And then one statement I heard so often is about finish one project, then start another project. So I asked the scheduling for this project, and this project seems like then will be in the recent is not another 5 years. So I didn't get opportunity to ask that question. Is there any construction impact in that area with other projects within the area already going? But I just want to mention that point from scheduling perspective. So I think at this point, yes, that's all from me. I'm going to recommend to City Council and to get more inputs from my colleagues about this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just wanted to add my voice to this one as well, as one of the ward councillors that butts up against this project, just on the edge of the ward. And yeah, I wanted to first appreciate the speakers who came out today, and want to appreciate that advocacy. I know it's been ongoing, and I've had a number of conversations with those folks, but also with community members in and around this area. I've been doing a lot of knocking on doors, but also attending community meetings and just reflecting on the AGM that was held over in Avonmore. Deeply appreciate having administration and staff members from the city there to be able to answer some questions about this project. And similar to Councillor Knack's reflections, I've also been hearing a fairly strong desire from community to retain east-west connectivity, and that is an important important connector going forward. I totally understand and can appreciate the idea being brought forward and that has been put out into the community for consideration, and also appreciate commitment to active pathways and maintaining that connectivity, which I think this project actually does and helps bolster that connectivity into the future, and lines up nicely with the future reconstruction and reimagining of 76 overall once that renewal starts to roll out. I am also thinking about this from a sort of environmental and ecological perspective, and absolutely there are trade-offs, but overall, I do think that the restoration of the bank and the partial daylighting of the creek will be positive for this area. Yeah, so recognize that there are different perspectives on this one, but just reflecting what I've been hearing from the wider community, up and down 76, but and beyond, I would say, for folks who do like to, be able to frequent the businesses, frequent Mill Creek Ravine, be able to go for walks, bikes, rolls in this area. Retaining that connectivity is really important, and would support this recommendation up to council. So again, just want to thank everyone who has participated in this dialogue, and appreciate some of the community conversations that I've been able to have, that just show that diversity of perspective, but would encourage committee to recommend this up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Salvador. Given Councillor Wright is closing, I'll jump in here too. Again, I want to thank all of the participants who have engaged with me on this topic, both who spoke today, who I've talked to in the community, and who also the community leagues I've had conversations with. Yesterday, I actually had breakfast with 4 of the adjacent community leagues in the area, and again, they reiterated that they wanted the bridge to proceed. And council members had a letter here from the league signed by the president of Argyle, Avonmore, Hazeldean, King Edward Park, and Ritchie. And I'll share just one paragraph of it if I may read quickly. 76 Avenue serves as a vital link between our neighborhoods, reducing reliance on White Avenue to the north and Argyle Road, 63rd Ave to the south. Recent Vision Zero Street Lab traffic control measures, including improvements along White Avenue to manage access to Ritchie and restrictions to 76th Avenue to mitigate cut-through traffic into Hazeldean, demonstrate a commitment to responsible urban planning that serves our communities. So I think there's if we zoom in on this one bridge and this one crossing, there's some open questions that's been raised by folks about whether this is necessary or not. But I think when we zoom out a little bit more and we look at the long-term planning for rapid transit, the bus rapid transit network from Bonnie Doon to West Edmonton Mall, when we look at how we're going to be, we have this brilliant plan for White Avenue in the future that's going to really make it much more pedestrian-oriented, really make it our Champs-Élysées, if you will. There's so much opportunity that's going to be happening there. When we look at the future transit planning that is going to be connecting the new density that's coming into both there's significant density planned for the southwest and the south central side of the city here. When we look at the future with the rail yard, that at some point that will not just be a train crossing, that there's the great potential for new folks there. There really is a lot more to consider when we zoom out more and more. So I understand the administration's concerns about having a bit of planned redundancy in the short term as we replace the bridge on White Avenue. I understand that as they've looked at this, that they want to continue here, and reading the site assessment last night and reading through the other considerations, I'm prepared to recommend this to council as well too. So the only other thing I'd say is some of the other information about like, for example, the $13 million if we were to remove the bridge and to reclimate the area. I mean, some of that is helpful context as well too, and Again, I know our reports are lengthy, but some of those considerations would be helpful as well too, to fleshing out some of the alternatives or the costs of alternatives if they were to proceed. So that's it. Over to you, Councillor Wright, to close.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jans. I was hesitant to even put the motion for this on the floor, you know, understanding sort of some of the environmental impacts, but then having to balance that with what happens if we don't do anything with this. I'm you know, from what I'm hearing, it will help to improve our wildlife movement. I think it'll improve accessibility for all different modes of transportation. And I think it can also serve as an option as we look further as to what we're doing along White Avenue. You know, during construction of that, maybe this will become an alternative route for some on a temporary basis. Again, if we're looking for a more, you know, walkable White Avenue, then maybe this route might become more usable as for roadway and for other modes of transportation as well. So I think it gives us some options and helps to improve things in the short term. For the creek, for the erosion, for the slope stability, and getting that improved and back on track. I would have appreciated, and I think it has been noted that, you know, some of the, you know, the further information could have been provided in the report to sort of allay some of the concerns that have been raised by speakers today, you know, and perhaps. You know, consultation with our Indigenous partners could also happen earlier in the conversation as well, rather than sort of, you know, it's not something that we want to just be to check off to do, that we do want to actually have their input and consult. And in regards to the deeming whether the location is essential, I don't know, I guess maybe our forefathers back in the day thought the route was essential because they put the trestle bridge in. So, but that needs to be replaced now. But I do think it is part of not only our car transportation network, but again, for those with accessibility to be able to get around as well. So I put the motion forward, and I'm happy to recommend to council their approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Please vote.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Sohi. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That is carried. Thank you. Next on the agenda is there are no public reports. There are no responses to councillor inquiries. There are no private reports. There are no motions pending. Notices of motion and motions without customary notice. I have 2. Does anyone else? Hearing none, then I'll look to the clerk if you have copies of these. The first is that motion 1, that City Council allocate $50,000 from the Council Contingency Fund to establish a vehicle noise automated technology pilot project and provide a report back on the opportunities for future enforcement, expansion, and advocacy opportunities. That can be debated at the next council meeting. Secondly, that administration provide a report to committee with options and analysis for a transit-oriented development incentive program to accelerate new housing opportunities around LRT stations and to include mid-rise, 6 or more stories, family-friendly, 3 or more bedrooms, and focus on areas 400 meters of an LRT station, as well as alignment with other city plan goals. And again, hopefully that could be debated at the next council meeting. Hearing
Councillor Jans,
please.
I haven't provided notice to you on those, but I do have something that I would like to put forward.
So you can you can read it in, unless you're asking for waiver of notice.
Do I need to have?
Well, do you want to debate it today or debate it in future?
In future,
Okay, then,
just to present or to make the motion, I guess, at council.
Yeah. So you're giving notice today. Please proceed.
Okay. Does the clerk need a copy of it?
Yes.
Okay. Just putting in the chat. Okay, so I would like to give notice that administration return to council during the fall 2025 spring supplementary operating budget adjustment with an analysis and options, including an unfunded service package to fund the conversion of winter-summer temporary assignments to permanent positions.
Thank you. Hearing no further notice of motions or motions without customary notice, we are adjourned. Thank you.